our sincere condolences for the loss of Ambassador Doug Barkley, the father of our Assembly, Republican leader Will Barkley, and a tremendous leader for New York. And our thoughts and prayers are out with their family as they suffer that loss. It's a loss for all of us. Well, good morning. And it's oddly quiet here at the Capitol today, but yesterday, Senate and Assembly Democrats voted to seal New York's fiscal fate. They doubled down on New York's decline. Their proposed budget is the largest spending plan in New York State history. It is a $200 billion tax and spend boondoggle. To put it in perspective, it's roughly the same size as California's annual budget. But they have double our population. There's something wrong here. New York was already headed toward the fiscal cliff, and this budget drives us right over the edge. New Yorkers already pay the highest taxes in the nation, and the Democrats' budget would increase them by another $7 billion this year, and then another $8 billion next year. This is a radical leftist budget that'll do more harm to our already struggling middle-class New Yorkers. It'll send more of our residents and our jobs heading towards the exits, going to other states. It'll have the unintended consequence of decimating our tax base because Democrats fail to ever acknowledge the real truth, that our state's tax base is hugely dependent on high-income earners. We've already lost more than 1 million New Yorkers that we know of at this point under Andrew Cuomo's leadership. And this budget will send even more New Yorkers fleeing to tax-friendly states. It's a recipe for total disaster, the likes of which New York cannot recover from. This budget doesn't help our economic recovery, it makes it much worse. Democrats cried that they needed this because we were facing a $13 billion budget deficit. That budget deficit was started and created before any of us even knew the word COVID-19. New York then got a federal bailout. If you believe Chuck Schumer, that bailout is worth $100 billion to New York. The last thing we need to do right now is to raise taxes and increase spending. This radical budget is being made possible because legislative Democrats are using it as leverage over this very embattled governor. Speaker Carl Heastie and Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins, they have the power to impeach and remove Andrew Cuomo this week if they wanted to. And they have the votes if they wanted to. But they continue to protect him, to keep him where he's at, to get their budget wish list at the expense of New York taxpayers and our future generations. They need Andrew Cuomo, and Andrew Cuomo needs them. It's a very symbiotic relationship. So while Democrats are all protecting each other, you know who gets screwed again this year? New York State taxpayers. That's who. Just like every single other year. There's no one in that building that's running the place that respects taxpayers. Taxpayers are tossed aside, they're disrespected, and they're treated as an endless well of money that politicians can suck dry so they can go back to their districts and hand out money like candy. This year is the most insidious example of how their collective corruption only benefits those that sit in positions of power. There needs to be a taxpayer revolt in New York, a collective awakening and reckoning that says enough is enough. It is way past time for common sense to make a comeback in New York State. And that will happen when we break up this party, we break up this cabal, we break up this one-party rule in Albany by electing a Republican governor in 2022 who will do what's necessary to put New York back on the right track and once again respect the hardworking women and men that are paying the bills in this state. So thank you for coming here this morning, and I'd be happy to take any of your questions.
Just from the top, you mentioned this was the largest spending plan ever, obviously. I think that you're in favor of spending cuts in certain places of the budget. Where would you like to see lawmakers take a closer look to make some cuts?
We have to see where we end up at the end of the thing. But to start out with a 22% increase year-over-year spending, that's absurd. I mean, we're in a time of great austerity. There's a lot of people that have questions about the future of their employment and jobs. But you have basically a wish list here, and I know that won't be the final product, but do you think Andrew Cuomo's got any leverage to bring austerity back? I mean, just because we got a bailout doesn't mean we have to spend it all right away. So, I think there needs to be a little restraint instead of acting like good times are rolling here. I mean, we have some serious problems in our future. We have no idea how many New Yorkers have left, how much of our tax base is gone forever. We've all become accustomed to working, remotely and using Zoom and various other methods. I mean, there's plenty of businesses looking at Florida as their corporate headquarters. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that there's more and more financial institutions. We've already heard from Goldman Sachs. We've heard from, Jamie Dimon looking at Austin, Texas. That's money, once it's gone, it's never coming back. So I think that there needs to be a real caution light before, people, line up to spend as much money as we possibly can. I mean, people have forgotten the value of a dollar, not just in New York State government, but the federal government spending, $2 trillion in very short order. It takes your breath away when you start to think of the totality of how much that is. But to have any budget plan that, is a 22% increase year over year, it's absurd.
Speaker Carl Hastie yesterday said that this investigation into impeachment could take weeks or even months. What's your kind of response to that? Do you think it should take that long? Should there be a time constraint on
I think it's a stall tactic, and I think it's all hollow rhetoric. I don't believe he really intends to do any sort of impeachment of this governor. I think they're trying to wait out Tish James' report, the Attorney General's report, which we also don't have a timeline on. We know it's ongoing, but I do believe that this is a protection mechanism for the governor. And I watched with great intrigue yesterday the governor's press event at the vaccine center at Jones Beach. Could it be any more clear that this governor's going nowhere? And he's doubling down, and he's waiting for time to elapse and waiting for people to forget how egregious the headlines were and how tough they are. And now, he's got a Siena pole that he'll hide behind, and he is going to take the Virginia governor, Ralph Northam's playbook and just hunker down and try to ride this storm out. That's why, we continue. I've called for this governor's impeachment since prior to any sexual harassment victim coming forward. We didn't even know about a sexual harassment victim when I said that we needed this governor's impeachment over the nursing home cover up and the obstruction of justice associated with that. It is I think that is something that I try to say every time I talk to a member of the media, that we cannot forget that this nursing home cover up is why all this started. And it is so important because there's still no apology, there's still no justice for the families that have lost so much and that their family members were lied about in this obstruction of justice that's taken place. So I believe the governor will try to ride out the storm and run for re-election, and that's why he must be impeached. And I don't think the political will exists in Carl Hastie's assembly, and Andre Stewart Cousins is just trying to hold on for dear life because there's some very spirited members of her delegation that I know want to vote to convict the governor that she can't control. I think she's got very loose control of that Senate right now.
You mentioned that electing a Republican governor would be a long-term solution for the tax issues and the mass exodus from the state. But it's a ways away, so that's kind of an obtuse idea right now. So do you have your eye on someone at this point, or several people?
Well, I think, as I said a few weeks ago when I was here, we have launched the search committee. You've all reported on various names that have publicly shown interest. Whether it's Congressman Tom Reed or Congressman Lee Zeldin have both publicly shown interest. Now you've got Rob Astorino and Marcus Molinaro that are testing waters. We are casting a very wide net. A statewide net, people that you've heard of, people that you haven't heard of, people from the public sector, people from the private sector. Everything is on the table. It's not obtuse because election cycles, we are within this cycle. We're already, nearing the end of the first quarter. There is, you look at other states in America, U.S. Senate races for 22 are already well underway. And we have an obligation to, cast that wide net, because I think that now people might understand that it matters who we elect and the character of the people that we elect. We've seen the darkest of dark sides of Andrew Cuomo here in the last month. And we need to elect someone that brings the right governing agenda to the table, a common sense solution. I'm not talking about some right-wing extremist agenda. I'm talking about getting New York State back to a centrist position and giving us a future where we can actually live and stay and keep our families together. I talk to far too many people that are talking about their future being in the state of Florida or South Carolina or Tennessee. That's not healthy. How is that? How does that give us hope for the future? How does that make us happy to be invested in our homes when, close family and friends are all talking about heading for the exits? New York has a very dark future under ideas like this. I mean, just laying it all out there and spending into a hole that we can't recover from. Well, what happens when the tax revenue dries up? We've lost so many businesses to COVID-19, and there's Band-Aids on the problem in some of these bailouts in recovery bills, but there's not long-term solutions other than get our economy reopened and get a regulatory environment and a tax structure where business could actually succeed.
Are you anticipating a primary for the Republican Party next year, or would you prefer to coalesce around one candidate and avoid?
I don't believe there's much appetite from the candidates I've talked to so far, or the would-be candidates, and certainly not under party leadership. It would be a waste of resources to have a primary. We should and will take great steps this year to have an identification, a vetting process, and then hopefully come and coalesce around a candidate in the third quarter of this year is what my full intention is and what we plan to do.
Is there any universe where before the end of this legislative session, non-sexual harassment or nursing home related issues can be addressed, like the catastrophic summer we saw criminal justice-wise last year?
I don't think there's any appetite to do things like, fixing the damage that they cause to our criminal justice system. I don't, being from Buffalo, I hear a lot of interviews from Crystal Peoples-Stokes. She seems to be solely focused on legalization of marijuana. The governor is trying to find victories wherever he can. He's saying he's real close to the goal line on that one. But other than the governor's scandals, I don't think we're going to be talking about anything more between now and June. I mean, the legislative leadership's clearly going to get everything they want in this spending package, and because they really have Andrew Cuomo, in a very, very weakened position. He doesn't have a lot of leverage. He usually comes into this process as a titan, bullying people into his position. But right now, he'd probably sign just about any damn thing they put on his desk just to stay in power. Any other questions? Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.